This is the first of two videos on research methods for historians. The second will focus on digitizing and organizing archival research material, while this one deals with organizing secondary sources and also goes over some general best practices. As such, it's applicable to disciplines beyond history as well. Now, two comments as I get started. One, you'll note that I use a Mac. That doesn't matter for many of the things I talk about in this video, and in any case there are PC alternatives. Likewise, while I tend to use Google products, the programs I'll talk about can also link to Dropbox and other services. Two, these are simple strategies that don't require any real knowledge of programming. My hope is that in addition to helping you think about how to organize your research, these videos will introduce and help you make you more comfortable with features built into software you already use. Let's begin by talking about finding sources. It used to be that when I went to the library to look for books, I'd scribble down the call numbers on a piece of scrap paper, trying to group together all the books that were on a certain floor. Inevitably, though, this would mean that I'd miss a title and would have to head back down a couple floors with an armload of books. It also meant that I'd very often forget which books I had checked out in the first place. Therefore, one of the first practices I adopted was to copy and paste the title of books I was looking for into a Google Sheet. That way I could sort by the column with the call numbers and never miss another title, never have to go back up or down a couple floors. This has also allowed me to keep track of what books I had previously looked at. To help with this, I adopted a color coding system. And this is one of the most important practices I can recommend, something you can apply across all forms of research. We'll come back to it in another context later in this video and again in the video on archival practices. So here, gray means I've checked a book out. Yellow means I've finished reading through it and taking notes on it. Orange means I've looked at the book but it wasn't of any use. And you'll also notice on the side various notes to myself. You'll also note that I have sheets within this document for other categories of books, such as newly released books that I want to make a note of for some other project or for a future course I know I'm going to teach. One great place to look for these is in the publisher's ads at the back of the AHA program that you get every year. I spend a few minutes reading through that here and there every January, going through the ads, seeing what books are coming out. Now, this is helpful because a big part of historiographical thinking is being familiar with books that you haven't necessarily read. Checking the AHA program allows you to recommend titles to colleagues, for instance. Say, oh right, John Totino's new book is coming out in April, you should definitely check it out. Another terrific way to stay on top of research in the field is by subscribing electronically to journal tables of contents, which you can usually do through a journal publisher's website. So in addition to the major titles in history and Latin American studies that I normally read, I also get the tables of contents from several interdisciplinary journals that are otherwise way outside my field. My best months, I'll go through and download articles and book reviews from these tables of contents as they come out. But one practice I aspire to as well is to create a downloading co-op with some friends and colleagues where we would take turns every month downloading articles of common interest. And how we would share those, I'll get to later in the video. What then to do with these PDFs? If you have an iPad, I would definitely recommend I annotate. I use it to highlight stuff from my own research and also to return comments to colleagues and students on their writing. Now here I've recorded the screen on my iPad to show you a couple of features. You'll note that I have another color system here. Yellow highlights mark passages that are of interest to me. Red underlines highlight key sentences or terms. Red highlights indicate what references I want to track down for my own research. Now one other suggestion here. The default document type in iAnnotate will allow you to do something we'll cover in a minute. But there is an option for flattened PDF that will save all of your comments at the end of the document, which is very helpful if you're sharing feedback with someone else. So with this, you would go up to Share Options, and rather than annotated PDF, you would select flattened PDF, and then upload that to Drive. Again, really, really easy, really handy. Okay, let's turn now to what to do once you've located your library of books or downloaded your articles. I use Zotero for secondary sources. I found it doesn't work as well for archival materials, so I've developed my own practices for keeping track of those. And those practices are the subject of the second video in this series. So with Zotero, I generally add items to my library when I'm ready to cite them. One of the nice things about Zotero, other than the fact that it's free and open source, is the ability to add metadata from websites. So for instance, if we go to this library catalog, we can mass select those articles or books that are of interest to us. Now, you can also certainly add journal articles as they come out. You can do that directly through Zotero. And that's how I've envisioned the downloading co-op, with people adding to a shared library within Zotero. An indispensable add-on to Zotero is Zotfile, which has a couple of awesome features. Let's take this article, which I didn't rename after downloading, but did read and mark up in iAnnotate. Zotfile will extract the metadata, create an entry in the Zotero library, and then rename the PDF with information that you can specify in the Zotero, in the Zotfile preferences. Now, one of the other great things is you can also extract the highlights you've made in iAnnotate or other programs. It's as simple as going down to there, clicking, waiting a second. I've already gone ahead and done this. So all of the text that I've annotated, highlighted, or underlined now shows up here. And what's nice is it will also link to the original PDF. So just given the way that my own research practices have evolved, I tend to download PDFs rather than importing the metadata and the PDFs directly into Zotero. This means that the PDFs have really stacked up in my downloads folder. So one thing that I've figured out how to do recently is to batch rename the PDFs using Zotfile. I think there would be ways to automate parts of this process, but I think what I've figured out how to do is simpler for large numbers of PDFs. So let's take these PDFs here, which again I've downloaded but not renamed, and we'll go into Zotero. And rather than adding them to our library up here, we'll add them to just a random group folder down here. This will keep the articles from cluttering up my main library. So it's just as simple as dragging them into Zotero, giving it a second to run. Didn't drag it well. Okay. So you can see it took a second to do, so I'm glad I didn't drag and drop it a second time. So we can see it here repopulating all the fields, or creating new entries for each of these articles. I don't know how much time I just saved myself in doing that, but it was pretty substantial. Okay, so one of the things about Zotero and Zotfile that's a little frustrating is that it's not readily apparent where these files are saving to. So what we can do here is we can right-click on one of the PDFs. We can go to Show File, and it'll take us to a spot deep in my library. So I hit left arrow a couple times to get over to the storage folder where Zotfile keeps all of, or Zotero actually keeps all the PDFs that you've viewed through the program. And I'm going to hit Command 2, which takes me from this column view to a list view. You can see I've modified by date. So here are all the articles that I've added in that last batch. So what I'm going to do here, go over to Downloads or really anywhere on the computer, create a new folder, and just give it a very quick name. Drag all of these folders that contain individual PDFs for each of the files that I just added to Zotero, and just bring it over here into my new random folder, and then hit Command F, to do a search, do PDF, and then click here, which will allow me to search in that file, or in that folder rather. And then I just select all these here, drag them into the Downloads folder. And this means that I can then just throw out all of these now empty nonsense name folders in Downloads. So again, here are all the articles which I just batched renamed. There's one more step I would take in organizing these PDFs, and this is a practice I've changed relatively recently. It used to be that when I was done renaming files, I would put them in individually named thematic folders. So you can see here Modern Latin America, 19th century Latin America, 19th century Brazil, and so on. The problem with this is that I was forgetting where I was putting things, or forgetting even that I had downloaded the article in the first place. So I would find myself with multiple copies of the same article that I had downloaded 3 or 6 months apart. So the change I've adopted more recently is to take advantage of the tagging feature in OS X. So rather than putting articles in individual folders, you put the equivalent folder names in the tags of the individual items. So go up to File, Get Info, or just Command I, and then add a bunch of tags. And what's great about this, again, you're not going to lose things. Your collection of articles isn't going to be fragmented into a bunch of places, but you can then search for the tags. So you just saw displacement coming up. Another great feature which I also learned in putting together this video is you can, in the sidebar of the operating system, you can add the tags or have the tags appear. So this makes it simple. So let's see, let's go over here. We've got a couple different articles on Haiti. So I've added Haiti there. We'll do it this way. I'm still playing around with this one. So this would allow you, if you hit all tags, it would allow you to search around your entire hard drive. And likewise, let's say hypothetically that bird article also dealt with state violence. I could simply, other way, okay, take the article and drag it onto the tag, and that would put the tag there. So again, really powerful, and I'd really recommend using this, maybe not just for articles, but for other parts of your research library as well. Two final general research practices to wrap up this first video. The first is to keep a research diary where you jot down little notes to yourselves of things you found in books or archives, ideas that you've had, and so on. You might think to yourself, oh, that was such a great thing, I'm definitely going to remember, such a great fact, such a great argument, I'm definitely going to remember what folder in the archive it was in, what book it was in. You're not going to remember. I can't tell you how many times I've lost track of really important references that were fundamental to my thinking. I'm still, more than 10 years after doing my dissertation research, looking for a couple of things that I found in the archives back then. And the second piece of advice is, in my own experience, related to the first, which is to back up. Back up online, use a cloud service, use a thumb drive. Back up every night when you get back from the library. Set a to-do item for yourself every Sunday to back up onto a hard drive. If you're doing a lot of archival research and you go home for a weekend or someone comes to visit you, give them a USB drive, burn them a DVD with the files on it, because it's really important to have those backups there just in case. So my own experience, I went back to Columbia to do my dissertation research, spent a summer, jotted down a lot of great ideas, but then there was a copy and paste error. I wasn't paying attention when I was emailing someone in the fall, and I managed to delete all of my research diary from that summer. Back then I didn't have a good research or a good backup protocol, didn't have an extra copy, so lost 3 months worth of really, really rich thinking. Anyway, I hope this video has been helpful, and I hope you'll check out the second part on organizing and keeping track of archival materials.